On the main table, we see a much warmer welcome. We look down at pocket aces, our very first hand. There's a straddle on and we raise it up from the cutoff. We make it $60 to go. Only the straddler makes the call. So we're going heads up to a rather favorable flop of ace 8-5 with 2 diamonds, so top set. He checks it over to me, and my opponent is a pretty solid player. I don't expect him to have a super wide range there. I decided to play a little bit tricky and deceptive. I decide to just check it back since we blocked some decent percentage of his calling range, even though it is kind of a wet flop with a flush draw and straight draws available. But I decided to check it back. The turn fills us up right away. It's another 5. Checks it over to me again. Have to bet now. I bet $40. Pretty small bet. Interesting news though, my opponent puts in a raise and he makes it, I think, $150 to go. I don't think there's too much point in doing anything other than making the call, and the river is perfect for us. It's a total brick. It's an offsuit 3. My opponent bets pretty sizable. He bets 400 and something. I want to say about 450 or 460. I only have somewhere around $1,000, so there's only one move here and it's all in. My opponent snap calls, and after I show, he shows us pocket 8s. So very much a cooler situation there. Nothing my opponent's gonna be able to do there. Certainly unfortunate for him, but very fortunate for us. Pocket aces, very first hand, doubling up our stack right away. Next fun hand comes when there are 2 limpers over to me on the button. I look down at king 5 of diamonds. Happy to just limp along here. I don't think I need to raise it and isolate with the king 5. Happy to take this one multi-way, and we're on the button. So I go ahead and over limp, and the small blind puts in a raise, makes it $40 to go. So pretty small raise from that spot after a bunch of limpers. The big blind calls, both the limpers call. Same old situation here. I'm gonna call as well. We're gonna take this one multi-way to see a flop, which once again, it's looking pretty good from our point of view. It's 6 high, all diamonds. The small blind puts out a c-bet. He makes it $80 to go. The big blind calls. The first limper calls. And the player in middle position, the second limper, he's going to raise it. He's not too deep. He's going to put in a raise. He's got a hair over $500 in his stack, and he decides it's all going to go into the middle here. So a pretty interesting spot. I guess we could go ahead and jam it. It's just going to look so ultra strong either way. When we flat call, cold call $500 with all this action, all these people behind us. I just decided on a flat call here, but I'm not exactly sure that's the best line because I'm never going to be getting away, I don't think, facing a raise behind me. Anyway, I decided on the flat call. The blinds make the fold, and the player in between, the first limper, makes the call behind me. I think she's maybe got about $600 in her stack left after this flop call. So we are heads up potentially to a side pot to the turn card, which comes a brick. She checks it over to me. Pretty straightforward here with her only having $600 behind. It's going all in. So I go ahead and jam, and she rather quickly makes the call. So we're off to a river card in a pretty sizable pot brewing here, and it is another brick. So I go ahead and show it, and she gives it the head shake. She mucks her hand. The player who jammed the $510 shows us 10-7 of diamonds. King high flush is going to get it done here in this situation. I guess this is sort of a good result and example of why I like to limp a hand, over limp a hand like king 5 of diamonds. Don't think I need to isolate with it necessarily, but taking it multi-way, some good things can happen as a result. Exhibit A. And by the way, I look like a genius and I say these things that make me sound like I, foresaw all these things happening, all these things occurring, and it's just run good. It's just pure run good. It's positive variance, and that's all right. I'm happy to take it. So things are obviously looking up here following that not so hot start. I guess when you dust it off with 3 high, the poker gods reward you a little bit. Next fun hand comes with straddle on to my direct left. I'm in the big blind, and it folds all the way around to the small blind who limps in. I was down at 10-8 of hearts in the big blind, and I decided to put in a raise here, try and knock out the straddler and just go heads up in position versus the limper in the small blind. So I make it 80 to go, and mission accomplished. The straddler folds and the small blind calls. So I think it's a pretty ideal, pretty perfect situation there. Once again, it's just so clear what a genius I am with all of these plays that I'm making, especially when the flop comes down, Jack 9-7, rainbow. Just flop the absolute joint here. Checks it over to me. I'm gonna put in a small bet here. I bet $60 here, and my opponent takes the bait. He puts in a check raise. He makes it $180 to go. Things you like to see when you're playing 5-10 at the Bellagio for the first time in a decent stretch of time. So yeah, I'm just gonna flat call here. I'm gonna let him, I'm gonna feed him a little bit more rope, and we're off to a turn card, which pairs the board. It's another jack. Not my favorite card, obviously. If you happen to have a set or two pair, we're now losing, but he's not actually that deep. I think he's got maybe about $400 here in this spot. He decides that's all going in the middle. He goes ahead and jams it in there, and no choice here whatsoever. Happily tossing the chips. Obviously gonna be losing some percentage of the time, but it is what it is. I go ahead and call. He asks if we wanna run it once or twice. I let him choose, don't really care either way. He decides 2 times is the number. First board brings a second pair on board. It's another 9, so that's not looking too good. And on the second board, it brings 4 to a straight. So that's not the ideal card either. So we could be chopping on that board. And turns out that's not the case whatsoever. Turns out my opponent has pocket aces. Believe it or not, pocket aces somehow in this spot. We were almost the trappee there, isolating the small blind from the big blind in a straddle pot. He goes to set the trap, and it doesn't work out, totally backfires against him, and that's a favorable situation for us. Flop the joint and get the maximum. Run good. This is what pure, unadulterated run good looks like at the Bellagio. All right, next fun one comes with an under the gun raise to $40 and a call in between before us looking down at ace-6 of clubs. I actually think all options are on the table here. I think 3-bet is fine, depending on the player. This player I don't think was getting too out of line, and especially from an under the gun position, raising it, bringing it in from under the gun, not exactly the spot that I'm looking to put in a 3-bet. I decided on a call and try and play in position versus these guys. Suited ace obviously going to play pretty well multi-way, so I put in the call, and the big blind, I believe, makes the call too. So 4 ways to a flop. This one comes Jack 7-6 with 2 diamonds, and the big blind checks and the initial raiser checks. The player in the middle puts in a bet himself. He bets, I believe, 60 or 70. 70, I think. I think he bets $70. I guess there's some chance we could have the best hand here. He could be betting with a draw. I don't know how great we're going to be against that range. A range of say a flush draw or even a straight draw with 2 overcards. Or obviously better hands, better holdings. But the price seems reasonable. We're still in position, and maybe we can turn it into a bluff later on. So I decided to make the call. Big blind folds, and the initial raiser makes the call. So we are going 3 ways to a turn card, which I think is a good one for us. It's an offsuit ace. This time the action checks all the way over to me, and this is a pretty obvious bet spot here. I want to size up a little bit and try and go for maximum value. Hopefully it's going to look like we have a draw of some sort here and are betting as a bluff, semi-bluff here on the turn. So I bet $210 here on the turn. The initial raiser, under the gun player folds, and the player in between, after thinking for a while, he makes the call. So off to a river card, which I think is a really good river card again. It's an offsuit 8. The draws miss. We should have the best hand here. Pretty unlikely my opponent's gonna have ace-8 here, or pocket 8s, or any hand really that we are gonna be losing to in this spot. So after he checks it to me, I'm gonna bet everything he has left, which is about $600. All the sizings here I think are pretty in line with what's ideal. My opponent is gonna have a tough time getting away from it for this price. The pot has grown to a decent size compared to the size of his stack. So after thinking about it for a little while, he does in fact toss in the call, and we go ahead and show. And once again, we have the best hand here. So just run good is on the menu, delivered directly to your seat from the lovely staff here at the Bellagio Poker Room. Things clicking, everything going our way so far. Again, you know, aside from the 3-high debacle, but everything after that. One more hand to report to you guys. One final hand before we call it a day, call it a night, morning, whatever it is. In this one, the cutoff opens it up for $30, and I'm on the button and looking down at pocket queens. And my opponent in this situation is somebody who is a subscriber to this channel, and he made a comment because I had actually 3-bet him a couple times before that the next time I 3-bet him, he was going to unsubscribe from the channel. So maybe he's actually not watching this anymore. There's a decent chance of that one. Because I do in fact 3-bet him here again, this time to $100, pretty standard size. He thinks about it for a little bit and makes the call. So heads up to a flop, which comes pretty safe for us. Comes jack high. So we have the overpair here in this situation versus a player who is maybe getting a little bit annoyed having to play out of position versus our semi-frequent 3-betting. Checks it over to me. I'm going to make a standard C-bet here. I bet $120. He makes the call. Turn is mostly a brick. It's a 3 of clubs, I believe, which puts a second flush draw on the board. He checks it over to me, and obviously not going to do anything other than bet it here. I'm going to bet $290, trying to get some value from jack, from a flush draw, from a straight draw, or some sort of combo draw. My opponent thinks about it for a decent while, thinking about his options, and he decides on the option of jamming all in somewhere in the neighborhood, I want to say, of $1,200 or $1,300. Pretty sizable raise, and I don't know if it's a snap call, but I'm pretty sure it's not a folds. I think if he flopped himself a set, he would have to certainly consider putting in a raise there. Of course, he could be looking for a safe card on the turn before getting it all in for stacks, wanting to play for stacks. That being said, with all the factors mentioned, the occasional 3-bet happening, the overpair, and a wet board, I think it's just going to be a straightforward call here. So after thinking it over for a little bit, don't want to make any too hasty decisions for over 100 big blinds, but gonna have to make the call here, and that's what I do. Toss in the call, and he asks if I want to run it once or twice. Once again, I say it's up to him, and he decides on 2 times, seeing 2 river cards here. So I believe the first river card was an offsuit ace. Second river card was a 7, an offsuit 7. My opponent announces a pair of 7s. After he makes a pair of 7s there on the river, it looks like he very likely could have had 8-7 of spades. I think that's a pretty reasonable holding, reasonable guess as to what his holding was. Whatever it was, turns out to be second best. The queens hold up in another big pot for us, and run good. Left, right, and center, run good all over the place in this session. We get into this game, this 5-10 game, this 5-10 session for $2,050. Kind of an odd number, but $2,050. Cash out of the game for a grand total of $6,345. We're looking at a profit of $4,295.